topmost favorite will always be Eden Gardens lighting. It was the first time a cricket stadium was lit in India. It was the first time in Phillips they allowed the entire design to be done in India.
I personally cannot figure out work-life balance because I think work and life are, I mean, I think they overlap and they should overlap.
I never played the gender card. It's your knowledge which is going to make a difference, nothing else. At one point of time, my boss came and told me, there was some issue. He said, I'm so glad, I don't have a woman in my team. I said, you're telling me. Oh, okay, okay, okay. I mean,
Inclusiveness, it is not a slogan. It has to come from within. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, depending on where you're joining us from for the very first episode of Towards a Better World in 2025. An episode that's very special for me. I'll tell you why. Any professional journey goes through a period of youth before it matures, where you dabble in things, where you experiment with your abilities, and where you unlearn your academics to learn the first ropes of the trade. My years of professional youth were with a company called Phillips, where I joined as a wide eyed sales engineer, and from where I signed off as a general manager with a national portfolio. This was where I learned how to sell and sell profitably, to network, to make markets where none existed, and to grow them when they were considered saturated. This was also where I found my first set of mentors and friends who are still around, who have ceased being professional acquaintances these days and have become almost like family today. My host today is a senior colleague from my Phillips days and who has been a teacher and mentor for me and hundreds like me for years and years. Unlike many organizations that encourage generalist leaders to move between businesses, Phillips used to breed leaders who were mavens in their own right. They were subject matter experts on lighting. I mean, no matter who the competition was or where, they were no match for the masters sitting on the Phillips' side. These were men and women who breathed and lived lighting and who have huge identity capital in the industry. These people could sit in those 7, 8 hour long meetings with some of the top experts in the world and come out on top. And if there has been someone who can be called an expert among experts, it is our guest today, Sudeshna Mukhopadhyay, an industry doyen and one of the most formidable and most respected voices in professional lighting, globally speaking. In this day and age of tokenism and slogans, where the battle for free speech and the battle against stereotypes often cancel each other out, we'll see how Sudeshna Di, as I call her, smashes so many stereotypes by just being herself. I am especially hoping that younger women professionals will gain a lot of inspiration from her journey. I have seen so many ladies do so in the years that I have known her. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me welcome Sudeshna Mukhopadhyay to Towards a Better World. Welcome, Sudeshna Di.
hey, Ayon, thank you so much. I mean, you made me so nervous with the introduction. I'm really humbled and honored to be part of your show. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know this is a global podcast, so uh, depending on where you are, I'm really honored and delighted to be here. And, I really am fascinated by the caption towards a better world. And in the industry which I am in, I think they need to do a lot to contribute to a better world. So look forward to our conversation. And if we can contribute collectively to make the world a better place for the future generation, I'm all for it. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Absolutely, Sudeshna Di. And on behalf of all our viewers, a huge thank you for taking time out to do this, especially as I know what a busy calendar you have. Now, since we don't want to wish, obviously, a single moment while you're live with us, let me get into the first question. Very rarely have I seen a career trajectory that's so sharp and successful, and yet which has been all about a singularly passionate purpose, like what your career has been. I mean, 38 years in professional lighting, Sudeshna. I mean, wow. I mean, while I know and everyone in the industry knows that, but we would still like you to give us a peek into your career in retrospect today. I mean, your page one, if I may call it that, and when was it or where was it that you discovered your calling in this industry?
Yeah, 38 years, of course, is a long year, even in a long journey. And I remember, about even 15 years ago, I was just addressing youngsters in my erstwhile organization, Phillips. And, it was in Hong Kong. And somebody stood up and said, but why? Everybody was glorifying that I've spent 25 years in the organization. And, this young person said, why? I mean, I think that was the time I started thinking, why am I in this, really, in this industry for so long? I don't think so. Lighting was a calling. Like any young, graduate engineer, all of in India, professional career was my calling. I knew very well when I joined engineering, my sole purpose was to pursue a professional career, not in a particular stream. My elective was power systems, so I mean, it has got nothing to do with lighting. Of course, Yadupur University now specializes in lighting. They run PhD programs, but it was not at that stage. So I joined Phillips as a GET campus placement, the usual route over there. But I was really lucky to work under a boss, and after I joined, I was told that I was the first woman they hired in professional lighting. Okay, so that boosted my ego a bit for that matter. You knew that you could actually make a mark in that industry. So when I joined, I was assigned two projects, probably assistant to an assistant to an assistant. I mean, almost at the bottom of the rung. But these two projects were extremely different. One was the lighting of Victoria Memorial in Kolkata, which was completely an artistic project, and the other was Salt Lake Stadium, which was really an engineering and a mathematical project. But these two project experience, site experience, actually triggered a certain interest. Not only lighting as a subject, but this entire activity of, B2B sales, pre-sales, and projects per se. I did leave Phillips after doing 1 year. See, before I joined or pursued a career, I knew I would not pursuing an academic career. That was not a calling. But I had a certain, what you can say, likeness for knowledge or education for that matter. So I did pursue my master's, and that too in digital signal processing, nothing to do with lighting. But when I came back, there's one gentleman, Mr. Pai, who was the boss at that point of
Yeah.
time, had a profound impact on me. I mean, leader
TR Pi?
yeah, TR Pi, leader par excellence. I had got an offer as usual at that point of time from one of the best IT companies in India. They were all hiring people. I had a degree from the US. It was very lucrative, even for the IT companies to hire people with, master's qualification, and especially from an American university. So he told me, look, a job is a job, but you are already in a niche field. And it is much easier for you to make a mark here. And did you not enjoy your first year, I mean, in Phillips, which I did. So actually, I joined or rejoined Phillips way back in 1990 at that point of time, probably at, half or a little over half the salary at what the IT organization was offering to me at that point of time. So it's a huge giveaway, but it taught to me two things very early in the career. That, money will not buy you everything. And at the end of it, it's not what is going to give you an identity, nor a core satisfaction of your career. I was extremely lucky. I got very good breaks. I had global exposure at very early part of my career. And from, 2, 3 years down the line, I knew that I'm not going to change industry. I mean, every project was different. Every customer was different. And you could, within an organization, based on the job I had, whether you take up roles or not, you could move the corridors from an R&D to production, to marketing, to sales. I mean, you had to network with all of them internally and externally as well. You dealt with architects, you dealt with government customers. So there was so much of variety, so much of divergence. I think that's one of the reasons I stayed back. In between, again, I was thinking, should I change my profession? Then I realized, what would it probably it would have given me a growth in terms of a job role title or some more money. But I was already creating a little bit of a mark in an industry, and I don't think so. I regret it at all. I mean, 38 years down the line, I stayed on in the same industry.
People who've seen your journey, they know, I mean, what is the kind of work that you have done and the work that you have influenced in your during the course of your career, Sudeshna. And I am definitely one of them who has worked with you for a part of my career but have studied your career for the rest of the time, so I know it pretty well. And that's such an incredible journey, Sudeshna. And for the viewers, Sudeshna is a master's from the University of Connecticut, which he just mentioned, and after which he came back and joined Phillips again, rejoined Phillips in 1990, and which was quite a number of years before I joined Phillips, and we'll come to that. But what an incredible journey, Sudeshna, and it is so inspiring. Now, moving on, like you started talking in the very first year of a career of a new engineer, you got to do two of the most high visibility projects which probably the industry would have seen: Victoria Memorial, which is a huge tourist destination, and Salt Lake Stadium. So in the very first year, so your body of work, that brings me to my next question. I know, and folks from the lighting industry know, but for the sake of maybe people who have dialed in who are not so much familiar with the industry, can you share with us some of the landmark projects in India and abroad that you've been part of? And the second part, this is a two-part question. The second part might be a little difficult for someone like you who's kind of spearheaded hundreds of projects. If you could name the top three of your favorite projects that you are most proud of in retrospect, Sudeshna.
I mean, to talk about projects, I mean, don't even trigger it. I mean, I'm sure I can bore people to death if we really start talking about lighting projects. One gets so passionate about it. I've been really blessed that way, and I feel also very humble because, as I mentioned, when we started our career way back 30, 35 years ago, the industry was very different, and the relationships probably, I mean, you really had a more a coach mentor relationship with your bosses. So yes, I did diverse projects from thermal power plants to lighting up of streets to buildings to monuments. So I never said no to any project which I was assigned to. So if you really see, my own passion is sports lighting. Also for the very fact that I like sports. So I was in my school days, I was an avid football fan. I don't follow so much now these days, but it wasn't very common to, be a football fan at my age, and especially for girls. So I really also went to, watch matches in the stadium at that point of time. And I recall when I did my class 10, I mean, the gift I asked my father, because I had I used to hero worship one of the Kolkata footballers, Shurajit Sengupta, and he was working in State Bank of India. So I said, that's the only gift I want. Get me introduced to him. So
Wow.
yes, so when I joined Phillips and I had an opportunity to work with sports projects, they remain my all-time favorites even today. So I mean, that's the most number of projects. Coupled with it, completely on the contrasting side, because that's how I got into lighting as well, is decorative architectural projects. As I said, one is science, the other is pure art, but there's a lot of physics in that, or a lot of science in that pure art. So, how you blend those projects become a time. If I start talking about projects, it's going to be too long. So let me come to your, the last part of your question. Top three becomes very difficult for me, but I'll just talk about a few projects which are very
Sure.
close to my heart. Most, of course, they are all the first edition projects because I was engaged in this project during the convention and lighting era. Topmost favorite will always be Eden Gardens lighting. It was the first time a cricket stadium was lit in India. It was the first time in Philips they allowed the entire design to be done in India. Earlier, all sports lighting projects used to be designed out of the Eindhoven design office. So I wasn't the lead designer at the start of the project, but my senior colleague and I, we went to Mr. Pai and we said, we'll take a chance. So we spent hours and nights in the mainframe computers. Those were the days of mainframe computers in Park Street, to churn out the design output and see out of it. But it was an extremely challenging project, not only from the technical point of view, but from the commercial point of view. You were dealing with a cricket association, and they were professionals in their private time. But when they came as, the honorable secretary or the president, they wore different hats. I think for me, it was the toughest. We knew we were almost the single bidder, but I don't think so. I have fought, harder to acquire a project like this. Even that you were a preferred vendor till the last moment, till they signed the dotted line. I mean, it was tough. And Mr. Dalmia, who was the then president of CAB, was such a tough negotiator. So it remains a very, very favorite project of mine. And I mean, on the lighter side, you realize that you literally had to climb heights to, rise in an organization.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I mean, I climbed all of the 75, 80 meters to commission
Wow.
that project. The other project, which is also very close to my heart, because that was almost Eden Gardens was the early part of my career, and almost at the later last part of my career, I was associated with another iconic project again in Kolkata. I'm a very Kolkata girl, so I will, give you reference of this project was Howrah Bridge project. Probably why I say it's a last project, that I was sitting on the drawing board with this project. I mean, other projects then became more mentoring and other things, but here I was still on the drawing board. I worked with one iconic figure in lighting. It was Mr. Taposh Sen. He was a very well-known person in theatrical lighting. In every Kolkata knows it, who are in, serious theater and drama. He's very well known globally. Probably did not get his due in India. He was a lighting designer for this project. Enormous learning. I mean, nobody actually lit up a scaffolding earlier on a permanent basis. So there's no surface to light up actually. So you really had to get into the physics, that how do you light up a mesh, a steel mesh, which did not
Yes.
have enough surface to, reflect the light, which will make it visible. So I think if I say the top two, I mean, these are very close to my heart. There's another project which is very close to my heart is Ramoji Film City lighting. You are
Mm.
lighting, it's a film city. I mean, you are lighting up a garden which was changing every day because the landscaper would come and change. But you had to make a permanent installation out of it. So everything was customized. You had to really think that how much would a bush grow. You had to take, I was sitting with the agriculturist, the horticulturist, and there was a they had hired a person who was a botanist as well. So I had to really learn how trees, would grow, how they branch out before you really bring a lighting solution. That project also got us, a global award. So I'm very proud
Yes,
of
I remember. I
that
remember.
project. Yeah. So
99,
these
right?
three,
Ramoji was 90.
99. Ramoji
Yes.
was 99 to that extent. So these three would be the top three. But there's another project I would also like to mention if you have time, where I shifted gears myself as from being a lighting designer to also being a lighting peer reviewer. During the Commonwealth Games in India, I was invited by the Delhi government to be part of their team in setting the standards for lighting up of Delhi. So, being an industry person, I, sort of became an internal consultant. There were a lot of NDAs. I had to ensure that there was no conflict of interest. I did not divulge anything, but everything was put in a public domain. So, you had to make something where at least 3 to 4 global, vendors could participate, but that was one. And then that moved globally. So I was also the peer reviewer for Auckland City Council for their sports projects. And also, like, I helped in commissioning some of the Olympic and FIFA stadiums. So, not personal favorites, but the top three remains still the Eden Gardens,
Kolkata.
Howrah Bridge, and Ramoji Film City. Yes.
You can take the Bengali out of Bengal. You can't take Bengal out of the Bengali. For the viewers, Howrah Bridge, you can. Yeah, I'll try to put in images when we put out the YouTube video. You should just look at the final effect that's come out of Howrah Bridge. And like Sudeshna mentioned, it's a truss, right? It's a mesh, and you have to put the lighting in such a way, and it's so beautiful. It's like an iconic landmark in India nowadays. Eden Gardens, it is like the lords of the rest of the world, and 100,000 capacity. And I remember it used to be the most famous, the first day and night matches, which started with
Yeah,
this lighting
sure. Yeah,
project
yeah, yeah.
in India. It's like part of history of Indian cricket. And mr
Absolutely.
mr Jagmohan Dalmia, who was the BCCI head, and he was at that time the CAB president, and I remember. And incidentally, Sudeshna, the 99 was the year when I joined Phillips. And when after a few months I saw you for the first time, and that's an amazing lineup. So we could actually fill up an entire episode by just showing reels of your projects. So my next question to this Nadi will be on leadership. And I remember, like I was saying, I joined Phillips in 99, and you had just come back from your stint at Singapore, and you were leading Phillips India's design and application engineering center. And I remember I used to be terribly in awe of you. I mean, I was too nervous even to, knock on your door if I needed to ask you something, because, you were so formidable, sitting with inside your room and doing your work. So, but then over the years, as I got to know you better, and when the work, also we did some projects together, I discovered a very unique leadership style and quality in you. I mean, unlike most leaders whom we worked under in the 90s, you were someone who were completely authentic, and you were never trying to project an image. I think that explains your popularity across different generations. So, because the respect that you had, it was commanded by your work and knowledge instead of being demanded by just a business card. So, can you tell us about your leadership journey and your leadership philosophy, if I may?
Oh, I feel very embarrassed and humbled. Thank you, Ayan, for all these kind words. Uh, firstly, I realized today that one never stops learning. That you were ever, afraid of me or, to even knock at the door. I think it is a result of bad workplace design. Let me put it that way. When you become a boss in the 90s, you were pushed inside the cabin, whether you liked it or not. So I think at the first opportunity when workplace redesigning started, I completely moved out. Whether my team liked it or not, I was sitting amongst them. Of course, if you had to have a meeting or a private discussion, you could move into a room, but otherwise, I was always down. I really don't know. I mean, if I had a style or not, but there are two aspects to it. And, I'm not an MBA, so I don't. I mean, I don't think I went by the management books that you need to adopt a certain style. As you mentioned, that I worked in a specialty field, right? So there were a couple of things which my also senior bosses and mentors taught me. I actually took up leadership roles at a pretty early age. I was the head of the Eastern Region design team when I was just about 27, 28. So was I ever ready for a role? I don't think so. I mean, I knew I had a certain amount of technical skills, but, being a boss or being a leader was something else. So I was never ashamed or never hesitate to learn from others. I always went to my bosses, peers. I had fantastic peers. Some of the best sales managers in the lighting industry was during my time. So I shadowed them. I learned how they were dealing with their teams. And I also had a very good team. So I also learned from themselves. So I don't think so. I had a any particular style for that matter, but I was open minded. At the same time, I am a stickler for some uncompromising things. I don't compromise on those. One is discipline. If a meeting starts at 10 o'clock, you better be in the room at 5 to 10 or even 10 to 10. I'm extremely critical about meeting deadlines and customer commitments. So you have an understanding of that, where you want to do. So I always said that if you're meeting deadlines, is not because customer demanded a terrible deadline, because you have no idea how long it would take to do a job. I mean, why do you even promise next day delivery when you know that you have to open 20 drawings or 20 AutoCAD files I mean, each file opening itself would take 5 minutes. If you're not in command of your job, you would meet deadlines. So I'm a very stickler for deadlines and integrity. I mean, these are the three things I would never go over there. So I probably lost a few very bright talent along the way, but I am also very happy that I led teams with very low attrition rates as well. So somehow they were there. So I in my style, I do balance work and life, and I like my team to do work and life balance. So I cannot create, but I'm not very good at corporate socializing, right? So it's not that I would spend a lot of time outside office hours to create bonding with my team. My bonding with my team happened at workplace itself. So be there, be fair, back them up when they are in trouble, give them space. uh, and trust the team. So as I mentioned, within when I took over in '99, there was no team at all. So I mean, I just got a glorified job role. I mean, without anybody. So we started recruiting, and they are doing so well now. I mean, all my direct hires at that point of time, they're either business leaders in some company or the other, or heading design teams, every one of them. So really, really, I mean, so you within 2 years, you have a very capable team. You empowered them, and I started sitting back and thinking, how to probably keep this organization relevant. In any large organization, an enabling team is not easy to, succeed, because every time when it is in difficult times, if the sales are not down, you would always say that, what is the design team doing? They're always sitting in office. I mean, I have to always encounter the questions. I always used to tell the team that I will handle that. You be at the with the customers, or you be at the drawing board when it requires. I really don't know. I mean, what style you would really classify that over there. But I'm passionate about my team. I've been very protective about them, even now. I mean, nobody can come and tell that, anything bad about them to that extent. So that's how it has been, and I think it's been an enjoyable journey. I was also pretty conscious about one fact. I mean, I mean, initially I always used to be with colleagues who would be always talking ill about their bosses. So I was very conscious about that, and if I've done something wrong, I would actually own up, saying, probably it was not a right decision, to make. Probably I should have heard you a little more. I mean, whether it was a technical decision or it was a decision with people. So I also owned up to my mistakes most of the time, and I'm sure there have been many. But at least for the ones I know that they were probably not right decisions, whether it's people decision, whether it is technical decision.
That's really very humble of you, Sudeshna, because people who know you and who have tuned into the show, they know what a formidable force Sudeshna was in Phillips, and like she rightly said, it is a very complicated leadership role when you lead an enabling function, and no matter how hard you work, you are as good as how the company's last quarter has been, and as soon as they hit a bad quarter, immediately people will start pointing fingers that and especially I was in sales, and I know how sales people think, that they imagine that all the good work, whenever it happens, the credit should come to sales, and whenever something wrong happens, the credit should go to the enabling functions. So that's the general mentality. But despite that, to create a parallel power center which was there, and when Sudeshna is under her leadership, for I have seen for almost 2 decades, I have seen unobserved, nobody could touch that vertical. That vertical stood solid like a rock. And the last part especially I liked it, Sudeshnadi, which you mentioned was, and which is the whole authenticity part of it, and which youngsters today listening in would definitely identify and love you for this, because uh, admitting to vulnerabilities was not a leadership style in the 90s and the 2000s. So people rarely admitted to making mistakes because they would think that it would make them lesser leaders. But today's mantra is, I have seen that people who admit to their vulnerabilities, they make much better leaders, and you used to practice it. So
Yeah.
great learning there. So thank you, thanks for that. So great learning, and I'm sure our viewers are taking notes, and I surely am. So my next question is about somewhat of this is a take off from the previous one, Sudeshna. So you've spent an entire career often being the only woman in the room. I mean, and in an industry that is intrinsic, that used to be at least intrinsically male centric. I mean, not just in terms of the employees, but also because it was a channel driven industry, and the channel, as we know, is mostly male centric. So these days, we were just talking off stage before the show today, so there we have a lot of initiatives around diversity and inclusion, and these were probably advantages that you never had, I mean, during when you started. So I know from first hand experience how, and you just mentioned it in your last answer, that how competitive, principle centric, and firm you are as a leader and as a human being. So what I'm curious to know is, and to understand is, how did you manage to not just hold your ground and grow so well in your career, but you how did you also create an ecosystem of women leaders in the industry? And I can name so many ladies out there, like some names immediately come to my mind are Nalini, Megha, Deepa, Dina, so many others. I mean, who worked with us and who were all like kind of your prodigies and were groomed under you. So I can name so many of them who were handpicked and groomed by you. So can you tell us how you managed to be such a successful woman leader while having also such harmonious relationships with everyone? I mean, you were not like the women's right activist. You had harmonious relationships with everyone, and I'll come to the relationships part in my next question probably. But if you have some advice for the younger generation of women leaders out there who aspire to have a career like yours, what would that be, Sudeshna?
Let me tell you one thing. We did not have any of these diversity, let's say teams and other things. I think I never played the gender card. Many of my women activist friends, they don't like me for that. When you are in a serious profession, my boss, PK Bandyopadhyay, who's not there anymore, he was a father figure to me. He brought me into the lighting industry. He taught me the very first day that it is going to be, if you are going to be in this field, which is about being a subject matter expert, it's your knowledge which is going to make a difference, nothing else. Whether you wear a sari or a jeans or, you put on lipstick or not put on lipstick, it's not how you would get acceptance with the customer. And that's very important. Your customer acceptance will happen when you're adding value, and that adding value would be through your knowledge. So I practice that all through. And let me be very honest and upfront. I don't think so it was a disadvantage to me at any point of time. Age was initially when I took leadership roles. I mentioned that I was, pretty young leader at that point of time. In Phillips, they used to say, the grooming of young potentials and high potentials and young leaders. So when I took up the leader as a national leader of, the lighting design team, uh, my bosses were there in competition. They were like 15, 20 years elder to me. So I had to fight an age card rather a gender card or an experience card. I would not say gender, age, but more an experience. He's been there in 25 years and you're saying that your solution is better than, them who have spent their
Correct.
lifetime. How long? You're just 5 years, 6 years. What do you know about lighting? But still, I think I spent a lot of time with R&D, and he's an iconic figure himself, Kunal Chaudhary. He helped me a lot. He really, really helped me a lot. I spent hours and hours in R&D. That's a role which is very close to my heart as well. So I think I had to overcome more of an experience card than a gender card. I never said no to anything. Probably you would know. I went through all terrible sites, Tenughat, Bokaro, Rajamundry, Rajmahal, collieries, under the, what you can say, under the soil, over the soil. So I never said no. But I also knew that, the gender has some disadvantage. If I had to go or do a product demo of a 20-kilo floodlight, I would tag along two of my male members saying that I will do the pitching, but you help me to, pick it up and
Sure.
open, open the part of it on the, the lightest side of it. Uh, I always believe a diversity brings a lot of difference. There is a DNA. In terms of, multitasking. Indian males are, I know you do a lot of work, but the type of work of women handles on a day-to-day basis,
Correct.
they
Of course.
have this multitasking built into it. The speed at which they have to take decisions also. Even on your, it grows with you. A child is sick, you need to take the decision immediately. You have it in you. The speed, the multitasking, the intuitiveness. You can read between the lines very easily. These are the things which diversity brings over there. So I really don't like this. Many companies now are talking about roles which are almost reserved for diversity candidates. They call it diversity candidates. I am not a great backup of that. You bring in competency, you bring in the skills of diversity. I don't like when you don't have that diversity in it. And it is not only gender diversity. That, when you work with global teams, what sort of learning happens? So bring in all sorts of diversity, ethnic diversity, gender diversity. So to my leaders, you mentioned about Megha. She's heading the design team now. All of them are having. There's one of the women leaders you may not have met, Surbhi. She's now the brand ambassador of a movement called Women in Lighting. It's a global movement. They have an Indian chapter out over there. So many women lighting designers now, and I think they bring in a complete different perspective as design is concerned, as also team management is concerned. So I think we must use the potential of what is inherent strength of women, then just play the gender card. That's something I don't like. I remember at one point of time my boss came and told me, there was some issue elsewhere. He said, I'm so glad I don't have to deal with it. I don't have a woman in my team. I said, you're telling me. Oh, okay. I mean, to that extent. So complaining to me how difficult it was to manage women in the team. So I think I did not cause agony to my bosses by, playing a gender card. That's something I was conscious of.
Totally agree, and totally agree. And I think I'll probably cover this when we talk of customers. But I for the viewers, we used to be in awe of how much Vishnadi could pack in her workday. I mean, the way she used to travel from city to city. I think 5 days a week, out of 5 days, 4 days she was on the road. I mean, that kind of travel, and very few males do that kind of traveling, and she was all game to do all that. So my next question is about stereotypes. Sudeshna, and we are discussing this already. So now we've already discussed how much you have smashed stereotypes when it came to gender. But I actually have a lot of regard for you because of your customer centricity. And you mentioned about your first mentor, Mr. P.K. Bandyopadhyay, who had coached you that your what ultimately will matter will be how your customer perceives you. And I've seen that live while working with you, your customer centricity, and also very importantly, your commercial acumen, because this is not something very common in folks from engineering or design. Because unlike other so-called tech experts, who very reluctantly would accompany contract and sales teams for negotiations, and even if they go, they would speak only the bare minimum just to clarify the technical aspects. But you were someone who had stronger primary relationships with all the customers and most of your sales teams. I mean, and I recall how much regard that all those leading architects of the time, the owners, engineers, and even the senior management folks from all organizations had for you. I've sat in meetings, like you might have forgotten, when we were closing Hyderabad International Airport, Bangalore International Airport with L&T, with Siemens. All of them seemed to know you. I was a sales guy. I would walk in and people will come out to talk to you. They will not even recognize me. I mean, that is the customer connect you had. So was this an inherent personality strength of yours, or was it a learned skill, Sudeshna?
A bit of both. I like, I like teams. I don't think so. I have been in a situation very, very grateful for that when anybody had said that, in Bengali we would say ওর সাথে খেলবো না type, like
Okay.
even from a younger age. So I was, always. I had a lot of friends. Diverse friends. So I guess, working with people came naturally to me. But to address your point, if you look at the jobs which a B2B pre-sales team, you can call it specification team, you can call it application engineering team, but this all work starts much before a project, the actual sales process starts. So I had and this is something again I learned from a very renowned person, Mr. Shishadri, who was, my boss in Singapore and my guru in all respects. He told me that if, as you just mentioned, if the head of Siemens doesn't know you personally more or better than the salesperson, you've not done your job. You might as well, lose the project. because you are supposed to be there from the start of the project. So starting from the, I mean, you should have spend more hours in that project than the sales team who come in much later into the project. I mean, unless you're probably you work with a key account team, but at that point of time, so much of account focus was not there. So in our times, it was actually we were also doing account management or
Yeah.
key account management along with working on the specifications, lighting design, working on the solution, if customization was being required. So along with that, we were doing account management. And I think it still holds good. And that's something I also keep telling the youngsters who are in design that if you are in this role, don't sit behind the computer whole day. I mean, I know we have fantastic software. There is, lot of loads, or, you need to meet very shorter deadlines because you have software, but you learn with the customer and at site. If you're not doing that, you can never actually excel in your role. In terms of building up the commercial acumen, actually, I built it up. I mean, when I was in the lighting design team in East, my counterpart was Didas, one of the sharpest sales manager, and all of you have also worked with him as well. And then, of course, there were really very, very sharp sales managers I worked with, Arjun, they were brothers. I really learned from them. I used to follow them, shadow them, how, and I also believe the customer is not buying a sales contract or a commercial contract or, a smart tax schedule. They're finally buying a solution. So I have to be on the lead side into it. So yes, I learned, I mean, if I picked up commercial acumen, I picked it up by close working with very strong sales leaders in my time and very strong business leaders at that point of time. I have also declined a lot of these project meetings if I knew that we are just going for the sake of it. I mean, sometimes they would try to pull in a technical person thinking that they will be the savior. They've already lost it. We've been too late into the project. And then you think, you're going to pull up a miracle from your hat. It doesn't happen. You need to put that effort. You need to put that time to win a project. So a bit of both in terms of, working well with people and also learning from others. I think you continuously learn from others. I mean, otherwise you don't survive in such
Mm.
industry.
And it also adds to what you said earlier in terms of getting credibility for an enabling function. Unless the enabling function leadership understands the dollars and cents, and they don't speak the same language as what management wants to hear. So people don't take you. I mean, they think that you are either revenue earners or revenue guzzlers. So you need to present yourself that you are a revenue earner, and that's what your teams used to do. And you mentioned Didas, and he just retired. And so I say, so we were in touch because he was in Singapore. So whenever he would come to KL, we'll meet for a drink, and so we used to reminisce the old days of Phillips. And Devbrata is like over the years, and he's such a great person to just spend time with. So much of knowledge. So great. So I think we are all we have about less than a quarter of the time left. So I before I move on to the audience's reactions and questions, Sudeshna, I wanted to have one final question to ask you before we open it for the audience questions. I mean, these days, as and you briefly touched upon it in one of the previous answers, was that these days we have a lot of talk around, this and all these memes around 90-hour work weeks, 70-hour work weeks, etc., etc. And while everybody has an opinion about them, for them or against them, but and about work-life balance, and I personally cannot figure out work life balance because I think work and life are not umbrellas that you leave outside when you enter each other. I mean, I think they overlap and they should overlap. But having observed you at work, I have always wondered how you manage to hit that perfect equilibrium. And you not just ace at such a high pressure leadership role, but you've also been such an active contributor to and an ambassador of the industry for decades. And you mentioned, like some of the things like Commonwealth Games when you partnered with the Delhi government, you international projects where you were kind of a peer reviewer, etc. And then, of course, we know your contributions to El-Coma and to Indian Standards, Bureau of Indian Standards, and all the other stuff that you do. You juggle so much despite having such a busy travel schedule. And on top of that, I know you personally, so I can share with the viewers that you are such an avid reader yourself and you are such an articulate writer. So, how do you manage to put all of that together in the course of a day? So, this
I mean, you're so good with words. I really always am a fan, about your selection of the words. People talk of balance. I mean, as I've being in the design, I always look at balance when you have very nice things all around and you arrange it and, you get an aesthetics out about it. I think equilibrium is a far better word. I mean, I mean, of course, being a student of science and engineering, I mean, you always like, yes, there are opposite forces. Work and life are completely different things. And just like you stand, you have gravitational pull and you have a pull on the other side. That's how you bring on stability. So there will be always opposite forces at work. Have I achieved a perfect equilibrium? Answer is capital no. I mean, you decide when what is important. Even when I traveled those 5 days a week and 4 weeks a month, the weekend was all mine. I mean, and these are probably a gender brings. I can switch off and I create circles around me this far and no further type, in both spaces, in workspace and in my life space as well. So in weekends, I would do things which are completely disconnected from a corporate world, laze around, cook, go and watch a theater, read books, read poetry, do whatever. Even my friends circle, I have a huge friend circle and they don't belong to the same corporate background, teachers, I mean, or homemakers or art, or I mean, I am very passionate about Rabindra Sangeet, so I would go and listen to somebody singing well and other things like that. So they are very disconnect worlds for me. I have given up many birthdays and anniversaries and other things, but I have tried to be with my friends, family when it really requires, during difficult times. Even this week, probably I will give up a very important social event to be, as you mentioned, as an industry, there is an important industry ambassador job which we need to do this week. So I will give up that. But I take the decision. It's not that it is being imposed on. I mean, I think that's where the conflict starts. If you think your job is important, your family is important, you will find ways to really bring in that equilibrium. So I can go up to, let's say, my elders and saying that, okay, I will not be there on your birthday, but I will make sure, I come in later or, maybe cook something myself and, bring it to them when it is, needed out over there. And at times I would tell them that this is my off week. If you really have to call me, WhatsApp me before you make a call. I mean, and I also, if you look at me, I mean, till 50, I was in an intense work. I took a decision to scale down at the age of 50. I moved back to Kolkata. I felt it was very important for me. I was missing my city, being at home. I was getting tired of living alone in a split family situation for years together, something I don't recommend to any youngster in profession. So, but those are the decisions I took. So I lived the consequence of, those decisions. Some are shared decisions, but sometimes you need to take a call yourself. And I think, I mean, let's not get into an utopia of saying it's a perfect balance. I mean, there's never a perfect balance, right? I mean, so be honest to both the things. I think that's important. If you have a circle of friends and close family, be honest and transparent with them. I mean, even this morning, some of my cousins were calling up and telling me, why can you not be on 23rd of January? It's a holiday. It's a national holiday. So we have a family picnic. You have to be there. I said, oh, I have to travel on that day. And hey, now you are 60. You are again traveling on holidays. So, what have you achieved in life if you can't take the shot? So that's where I sort of put a door saying, okay, I mean, it's a decision I've taken. I will travel on that day because I think it's important. And probably the following week, I will tell the Havens team not to even give me a call because that's going to be my off week. So I sort of now balance it that way. I mean, but I've never strived to be in. And just on one part before we close, I mean, I'm not a great reader, not a writer. I'm so deluged with codes and standards these days that I am really, really now. I mean, I don't like it, but I really, my reading and personal writing has gone down drastically. So it's technical reading, technical writing. These days.
You're just being modest, and I think I know, and for the reader, for the viewers, so that what Sudeshna just said. I mean, uh, she embodies what she says. Currently, when I was asking her for a date for this podcast discussion, she told me that do it any day after 18th, because on 18th, I think she had a function, a commitment to a family friend's 50th wedding anniversary, I think. So, and an ex-colleague turned family friend, I think, something like that. So, and she said, I cannot compromise on that day. So take it any day after that. So she has like absolute, kind of a watertight compartment, like she said, and she chooses things that I want to do this on that day. And she just did that long industry event. It was last month, right? December. You did that
November, yeah.
in November. So and all these events that she chairs, and I think it also helps your passion at your job, because uh, I think the thing which you said on and that is very important for people who are somewhat in a creative profession, because unless you know how to switch yourself off and connect with diverse other interests, I think you don't get that spark of creativity back when you're back at work. I think that's why it helps in your work so much. So there are a lot of comments and questions both. So I'll try to read out the comments within the time we have and try to see if we can get a couple of questions in. So Ashish Bahal is saying, Sudesh Nadi is a beacon of inspiration in the industry and a trusted friend and mentor to me. Despite her busy schedule, she remains incredibly humble, accessible, and passionate about lighting. She is very humble, and her integrity and knowledge of lighting are unparalleled. Kudos and hats off. Then she's saying she is an alchemist herself. So Ashish, thank you, Ashish. I echo your
Yeah.
words. Hiral is saying, hi, ma'am, you've had such an illustrious career. What first drew you to this field and what keeps you so passionate about it? I think you kind of answered it in your first, but if
Kind
you
of
want to just
answered it.
take a
Yeah.
brief stab
Yeah.
at it, yeah.
Yeah, I think one, you need to keep on innovating, on what is really driving you. So what drove me at the start of my career and what drives me now are quite different. These days, I spend a lot of time coaching and mentoring, so I get a lot of satisfaction. You talk of Ashish, I mean, he was in my team. He's now an independent lighting designer himself, and that makes me feel very, very proud. So I think things change, and I do a very different job now than what I was doing earlier. Though I'm in the same industry, so I think you keep, and it is still an SME job, but helping a very large organization to get into a field, a new area of business through knowledge, is something which is also now triggering me or my interest to remain in the industry. So yeah, I mean, and I said I do a lot of industry work, so a lot of things which keep on. You keep changing what triggers you. I
Right.
think every decade I sort of pick up one. That this is something I'm going to pursue to that extent.
Great. So I think, Hiral, I think that answers your question. And Aman Bhanusali is asking, you have been a part of both global and local projects. What are some of the key differences you've noticed between working on international versus domestic designs?
Oh, timelines. I mean, if you talk about any global projects, and especially of large scale, I mean, you start years and years before the project is really going to take off. So much so, I recall, I mean, when the Beijing Olympic Games was commissioned by the Phillips China team, It was almost 1.5 years ago before the final date. So I used to tell the design manager of, Beijing, very well-known person in lighting in China, that, I mean, if you've really done all the trials so early, do you think the lighting levels will still remain constant during the games,
Sure.
or, is it going to also depreciate? Because they are so well planned. So I think that's a huge difference in terms, and I think respecting deadlines, um, uh, some things. But uh, having said that, also in India, if you are able, with conviction, able to explain to your customer regarding, deadlines, everybody says fashionably that I want it yesterday. I mean, wanting it yesterday is a reflection of bad planning, or, I mean, not being up to your mark in your job. So it's nothing. It's proud thing to say that I wanted yesterday, but somehow you keep giving that message with conviction, you would be working it. So I think, yeah, it's more about planning, and also value versus price. I think global
Yes.
project, it's much easier to sell value. Here you are still stuck with price. So uh, majorly you are stuck with price. It's changing, but majorly it's still a very price driven market, India.
Yes, very true. And I think, that's what, and Aman, what Sudeshna said, the last part, actually, I can vouch. So, because in lighting, I haven't seen international projects, but like her, but value versus price, absolutely. In India, you start with the price and then you peg a value to it. Globally, you start with the value and mostly, and then you arrive at the price. So that's the very core difference there. So maybe, we have just 1 or 2 minutes left. We'll take one last question, Sudeshna. So it is from Alicia. She's asking you that you've held leadership roles at major companies like Phillips and Havells. By the way, Havells, Sudesh Nadi, is you are with Havells since last couple of years, right?
4 years, 4 years, 4 years.
4 years now. She's a vice president and she's also a consultant there. So, and what challenges did you face as a woman in a field that has traditionally been male dominated? What changes have you seen over the years?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I mean, I never looked as my gender as a challenge anytime over here, not now, would there. But just before we started the conversation, I was discussing with Oyon, system is becoming complex. Probably I was more comfortable as a women leader, when there were no women in this industry itself. Now we have a lot of women in professional field, not only our industry, and I think, somewhere it is not as easy as it was before. I mean, probably too much of, virtual connect. You never know what happens when. I get a little worried when I see women, designers or engineers in the field late at night. I have worked through the night in very godforsaken places. I never felt fear, but somewhere that is coming now. Is the society changing? Are we getting less sensitive to women as, as a species? Probably it's a deeper discussion. Uh, Personally, I don't think so that, it has affected me, but I am a little more concerned than the women in my team now, from the safety point of view, from acceptability point of view, from certain biases. Strangely, I see more bias now than what it was earlier. I mean, I had to answer a question. Do you think she can go and meet customers? I am sitting in the interview as the same thing. Can they be comfortable with government customers? It's not that you're only dealing with Prazo. Those two customers would practice different set of values and ethics. I mean, it's, over there. But so I think there are certain challenges which were not there, which seems to be growing now. Very worrying for me, if you tell me that way. Not the way I would like to end the conversation and this interesting dialogue. But I would always encourage, women to think that you would always say your career matters. I think that's I mean, I am an absolutely propagandist of it. I mean, women career matters. I mean, it is not a hobby they pursue. When they pursue professional careers, respect that, enable them. And that's how you bring in a lot of advantage to your organization as well.
And your career is of course a testimony to that, Sudeshnavi. And just a small anecdote, on what you said just now, and I'll share with you, Alish. So these days we have a lot of tokenism, a lot of slogans around, inclusivity and stuff like that. And I can tell you an incident, say about almost 20 years back, probably. So I was just an area manager at that time. Sudesh Nadi was the all India head for design, etc. And we would have, those. We would have those dealer conferences in the regions where in Philips we used to call it PLDA, Philips Lighting Dealers. They were big events, in our company, and and there used to be cocktail parties and stuff like that, in the evening. So I remember there was an incident in it was in Taj, one of the Taj, some city. I forgot which city. So we were having in the ballroom, we were having a dinner and a cocktail dinner, and Sudesh Nadi was the only woman in the room, and they were all dealers and all guys. I mean, all the employees were males, and some dealer, got a little drunk and tipsy, and he started. Taking a mic, and he cracked a joke which was not very tasteful, and you won't believe the sensitivity in the room, that it was a room full of males, and our national sales manager at that time, and another person, I mean, they just took the guy out and ushered him out of the room. So they didn't even notice that this guy has been cracking that joke, but the males were sensitive. I think that's what I think we need more, that men should be more sensitive. And inclusiveness, it is not a slogan, it has to come from within, and it has to come, women need to feel that they are included, and men need to think that they are equals. Like she said, a woman's career is not just a hobby project, it's damn serious business. And somebody like Sudeshnadi, who is so educated, so qualified, and such a doyen in the industry, her career matters, because her career has created dozens and dozens of other careers after her. So that's why it matters. So I think with that note, so I mean, it was a fantastic conversation. I mean, amazing to listen to you after almost a decade, I guess. So thank you for taking time out. And I think this will remain as one of my favorite episodes of my podcast, Sudeshna. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ayon. Thank you very much, Thinkly team, for hosting me. I feel very gratified. And as I said, that if we can contribute towards a better world in whatever way we can, through coaching and mentorship, so be it. Thank you very much, Ayon, for having me.
Thank you. Have a great day, Sudeshna. Thank you. Bye.
You too.